Hello. Hey everybody, I see Chris, you are still looking for the decanter. All right, so here's the trick. If you don't have a decanter, pour out a half a glass of wine, like so. You can then put the cork back in the bottle, because that'll allow a little bit of oxygen into the wine, and then just flip the wine upside down. That'll infuse the oxygen all throughout the wine that's already in there. So if you ever are missing that decanter, or like me and just broke it, then that is what you can do. So hey everybody, glad to have you all here. If you are tuned in and participating in the chat room, go ahead and give me a shout out where you are coming from and who you are. I'm super excited about this class on dirt. One of the many classes on dirt that we have had and we will have. Hey, Tawana. By the way, everybody, Tawana is my new second delivery driver. So viniculture is expanding and it's really awesome. So love it. So that's Som Pop here, the West Virginia decanter. I like it. It's actually coined the Molly Duker shake because there is a winery in Australia called Molly Duker, and they invented this as like a very chillax way to decant wine unpretentiously, especially when you're on like a picnic and don't have a decanter. So, hey Ryan, great to see you. Hello from Maryland. Hello. Hi Antoine. Anna and Beth here, downtown Norfolk. Great to see everybody. I know a lot of people aren't going to be able to tune in live. They're going to watch the recording later. So in order to make their recording a really good time, please feel free to make all of the silly comments in the chat box below. So, all right. First things first, let's make sure we are all set up. Go ahead and pour yourself kind of a large glass of the first wine. I'd love to show you what the first wine is. Hopefully you all have tags, but my label fell off. So you will have to guess. It's the Muscadet. So the other white wine is this wine. That's going to be white wine number 2. So go ahead and pour yourself a large glass of the Muscadet. Wine number 4, yes, that's the only one that I'm recommending to be decanted. We don't really need anything else, but if you want to go ahead and open up the other ones, and actually, Anna, yours have been opened and kind of already decanted since I opened up your wines at noon, so you don't have to worry about that. So, hello, everybody. So, all right, super excited. Let's get talking about what we're not going to talk about first. I think this might be the most simple way to do this. So this class is all about granite soil vineyards. And what we're not going to be doing is talking about how we can taste the granite in these wines. So don't expect that to be the case. We'll talk about why that is in just a second. But during this intro part, basically this first wine is just to enjoy. So sip on that while we get a little bit of the nerd stuff, the chemistry and the geology stuff out of the way. While we can still all retain a little bit more information because we haven't had 4 glasses of wine yet. So what we are going to talk about is the concept of terroir. I'm going to type that in here so we all know a lazy French word. Hi, Lonnie and Kita. Good to see you. I guess I can't see y'all, but I feel you in spirit. So the idea of terroir is it's a sense of place. So me where I am right now, I'm in Suffolk. It is really bright because I've got these fluorescent lights. I'm sitting on a wood chair. I feel the tile floor on my feet, cold glass in my hand. This is all my sense of place. The fan is blowing a little bit. Don't hear any music or anything like that. All of those aspects come into play to create this sense of space, which is very different if I were just to walk 10 feet over, and that would be in my parents' living room. So carpet on there. There's no lights on. It's dark. If it were a month later, the fireplace would be on, so it'd be much warmer. Very, very different sense of place, even though it's only about 10 feet away. Well, vines have a sense of place as well, and there's so many things that come into play. Most people assume that the word terroir means just the soil. So when you talk about like, oh, this is a terroir-driven wine, or I can really get a sense of the terroir when I taste, or this wine really expresses the terroir of the region. They generally are talking about soil. Well, that's only one part of terroir. So soil, yes, is part of that sense of place, but another aspect is the aspect. So the elevation and slope of the hill that you're on, or maybe you're not on a hill. If you are in the northern hemisphere and you're on southern facing vineyards, you're gonna get way more sunlight all day long rather than a northern facing vineyard, and you're not gonna get all that sunlight all day long. So how much rainfall you get per year, the different winds, whether or not you're susceptible to frost or hail, all of those things in terms of climate, aspect, and the soil come into play to create the whole idea of terroir. So these classes are all about soil type, but that's just one part of terroir. So just make sure you know that those are two distinct terms. The other thing we want to talk about is what is soil. So in the wine world, soil isn't what we think of when you think of gardening. When you think of gardening, you think of potting soil, you think about like rich, fertile, very broken down, soft soil. That is not what is the case in any of these famous vineyards and these wines that we'll be tasting. Soil is definitely just basically rocks and broken down rocks in vineyards. So you rarely have any topsoil. If you do, we're talking less than like 3 inches or so across the board. And that's like your traditional, what you think of when you think of soil. The rest of that is rocks broken up into different textures. So on that note, if you finding my papers here, this right here, this is basically to give you a more like pictured idea of what the soils are that we're talking about. So soil texture is just basically the size of the particle of the soil. So loam would be a lot bigger. You have silt or loess is how that's pronounced. Sand is very, very fine particles. Gravel, obviously larger, almost like could be the size of your fist or larger in terms of the size of those broken down rocks. Clay is the finest of all. Then we have alluvial or alluvium. Actually, that's the finest, but no vineyards are really made up of that. What the textures are made up of the actual soil types. So 2 different things, soil type, granite is what we're talking about, and then soil texture. As these big bedrocks get broken down into smaller and smaller parts, they become different textures. So it's a really important distinction. I remember someone I was talking about, oh, like this vineyard is clay granite. And they were like, well, I thought clay was different than granite. Well, clay can be made up of broken down granite. Clay can be made up of broken down volcanic soil or basalt. Clay can be literally broken down schist. All of these different soil types can be broken down into these different textures. So there's terroir. Soil is a part of terroir. And then within soil, you have the type and the texture, and both of those are really important. So the last term that I want to help us redefine, I think if there's one thing that everyone gets out of this class, this would be it. It's the term minerality. If you've noticed on any of my wine tags, on the back of my tags, in reviews of my tasting notes, I often will talk about minerality. That's not an English word, and so if you type it in, my minerality, and it's really frustrating. But minerality, not a technical word, but basically made up by the wine community, and it's only been in the last like 35 years that this has been a term that we've used as wine nerds, wine drinkers, wine raters, tasters, reviewers. And it really defines, or how it is used, is a sensation on the palate that when you taste wines, it almost feels like there's minerals on the palate, like a chalky minerality or a slaty minerality or river rock minerality. I can only say river rock minerality at the very beginning of this class. Or pencil shavings minerality. All of that minerality really describes that sensation or feeling on your tongue as you're sipping the wine and as you're drinking the wine. We are not talking about, even if many people are confused about this, and I'm talking like many wine professionals are confused about this, the roots themselves are not picking up the soil, picking up the rocks and bringing those minerals into the grapes, and thus like it's surviving the winemaking process and somehow able to be tasted or detected on your palate. That is not, there's no scientific basis for that whatsoever. I know if you've attended the other soil series classes, you've heard me talk about this before, but we're gonna go a little step further, because I didn't know how widespread the misinformation was until I drove for 3 hours today making some deliveries in Williamsburg, and I listened to like every YouTube video on minerality that I can think of, just because I wanted to see what are other people saying about this. And it is crazy how many wine professionals out there are talking about, including like winemakers, are talking about, oh yeah, minerality, you can really taste the soil that the wine was made in, and only if the roots go really deep though. So that's why it's important to have older vines, because then you can taste more of the minerality. All of that is just bullshit. There's no scientific evidence for that whatsoever. You cannot literally, as a vine, like if you are a vine, absorb the rock, the geological minerals from the soil and bring them up into the vine. You can absorb minerals like magnesium, calcium, potassium, iron, all of those nutrient minerals because they're water soluble, but you can't actually absorb granite. You can't absorb sand. You can't absorb limestone. You can just absorb the nutrient minerals that are components of that soil. So the soil has to be broken down, weathered a whole lot, releasing those nutrient minerals, and then the vine's going to absorb that. But magnesium, you can get magnesium from lots of different things. Decomposed little animals, basically, and microbes in the soil are going to provide magnesium. And a vine doesn't care if it gets its magnesium from decomposed organic matter or if it gets it from broken down weathered rock. Magnesium is magnesium is magnesium. So that's not what's giving the wine a specific flavor or taste. So if it's not minerality, if minerality doesn't mean that we are literally tasting the geological minerals of the soil the wine is grown in, why does soil matter when it comes to what the vineyards are made of? So that's what this class is going to be about. It is not about tasting granite in any of these wines. It is not about tasting any of the geological minerals. It's about what granite does to the vines, to that specific terroir, to make those grapes taste different, and thus the wine. So it's kind of like this, what's that word? Like indirect. It's an indirect correlation. So it's not a direct correlation because we're not tasting granite that has been absorbed by the roots. We are tasting an indirect correlation of how the grapes change as a result of the soil that the vines are grown in. So hopefully that makes sense. It will make a little bit more sense as we go along, but I don't want to get too fast. But and hello to everybody as well. Rick coming from Williamsburg, fabulous. So that's the start of the idea of what minerality isn't, or what soil doesn't do to our wine. But now let's talk about what it does do to our wine. So the other page, if you have it, the soil fundamentals, the Terroir 101 page, and here's a couple of the key things that we're going to talk about specifically with granite. What soil does do to change the overall flavor profile of the wine. So first of all, vines make wine. Vines make wine as a result of making really delicious grapes. But if the vine has way too much nutrients, way too fertile soil, so it's got a lot of water, you'd think that that would be a great thing, because then the vine's going to grow a whole lot more and then produce a lot more grapes, and you're going to make a lot more wine. Not so. That might be great for some other fruits or for cereal grains and stuff like that. But when it comes to making really top-notch premium wine, it's all about making sure the vine actually struggles a little bit. So you want to have the vine under a little bit of stress. You need it to be hungry all the time and thirsty all the time in order for the grapes to become better quality. And that's because if the vine's under a little bit of stress, it triggers certain genes in the vine to think that it might not survive. So then it's going to spend all its energy, instead of growing, it's going to spend all the producing the best possible berries to entice the birds to eat the berries and carry the seeds throughout the world, because they're just trying to propagate. They're just trying to spread their seed throughout the world. So that is why it's so important for the vine to be under stress, because you want the vine to think that it might not survive. So you want it to force all of that energy, all of that energy from photosynthesis into production of really, really, really delicious berries, because we're going to use those berries and make wine. So in terms of soil, it's about making sure you have the right amount of water and nutrients available to the vine. So let's talk about clay. We live here in Virginia, although some of us are tuning in from other states. But in Virginia, we know it could be dead of August and we haven't had rain in 3 weeks, and we're gonna go dig in the backyard to plant something. We hit that red Virginia clay, and there's a in 3 weeks, but still a puddle, because clay retains so much moisture. Versus gravel, if you have a gravel driveway and it rains, no puddling whatsoever, especially if it's deeper gravel. So gravel provides the excellent drainage they need. So depending on the region you are, so you're in a really rainy region, you actually want more gravel, more loose rocks, more drainage to be had in all of your soil textures, so that the water doesn't pool up and the vines become lazy, basically. But if you're in a really drought area, an area that doesn't get a lot of rain at all, you don't want that gravel. You want a little more clay mixed into your soils, because you need to retain that moisture. The little moisture you get, think Eastern Washington State. We just did the Meet the Winemaker tasting last weekend. And the clay is really important in those soils because it only rains 6 inches per year total, not on an average week. So really important on different areas to have the soil types that are conducive to the vines growing in that specific area. So people talk about limestone being the best soil. Well, why is that? It's because it has this like magic ability to retain a right amount of moisture and let all extra moisture be drained. So it's never going to have too much moisture, but it's never going to be moisture free. So that's why limestone, no matter where you find vineyards in the world, doesn't matter if it's a rainy area or a drought-ridden area, limestone is perfect wherever you go. Granite is a little bit different. So let's talk about granite's capabilities to store water and nutrients. So granite is formed by magma. So underneath the Earth's surface, we're all just floating on magma, which is kind of wild when you think about it. And this magma, as it comes up to the Earth's surface, not through a volcano, because that would be different, it's going to steadily cool under immense amount of heat and pressure. So as it's rising up, the pressure is increasing, or actually, I think the pressure is increasing and then it forces it to rise up. I'm not sure which comes first, the chicken or the egg in that. But as it cools, it's going to basically collect all of these crystallized minerals in the layer of this cooled magma. Well, for granite specifically, these crystallized minerals are quartz, feldspar, mica, and a few other ones, but those are the 3 most important ones to form granite. So as this cools and hardens, it becomes basically this solid bedrock. And then over centuries and centuries and centuries and thousands of years and millions of years, through different tectonic plate shifts and just weathering of different regions, you're going to push these layers of solid granite bedrock up closer to the Earth's surface, where they will then be exposed to other weathering aspects that are going to break it down from solid bedrock into super fine particles. So let's, I'm going to actually finish this a little bit about granite, and then we're going to talk about this wine, and then we'll talk more about granite in just a second. So the 3 specific nutrients that are crystallized in here are so important to granite because it makes granite the really complex soil type that it is. So for instance, limestone, we keep talking about limestone because everyone talks about limestone when it comes to wine. Limestone is really just one mineral nutrient, and that's calcium. That's the only thing that's composed of it. Versus granite, you've got dozens and dozens and dozens of different mineral nutrients in there, which makes it a very, very eclectic and interesting wine growing soil type. So the quartz that's in there, quartz is white and it's going to be super crystal, and it's going to not be subjected to erosion very well. So as granite breaks apart, as it becomes more and more weathered, the quartz is actually going to stay crystalline and stay at the top and stay really, really like firm, gravelly texture. It's not going to be broken down very easily. Versus the feldspar, that's the pink color in granite. If anyone of you have these granite countertops, now you're going to all go look at your granite countertops and see the pink and be like, oh, that's feldspar. And see the white, that's quartz. And all the black vein throughout there, that's mica. So that's what makes it such a beautiful, beautiful bedrock that we make countertops out of. So the feldspar is pink because it has a ton of sodium content in it, and sodium has this pinkish hue. So that's what's giving it that. So as it weathers, the mica, which is black, feldspar, which is pink, are going to weather to fine fines. That's actually going to chemically change into clay particles, really, really, really tiny grained molecular connected materials that make up clay. This is how tiny it is, like a single particle of clay, unnoticeable by the naked eye. We're talking like 1/1000th of a millimeter wide. Like that's how tiny these particles are. So all this broken down feldspar and mica get together, they make clay, and as clay gets in contact with any moisture at all, clay is going to expand. So water and clay makes this like putty basically that all the water is just going to be collected by. So as it's all being broken down, this granite, you've got the gravelly quartz at the top that gives that like crystally sparkly. You get looser and looser sections, and then you have this layer of all of these really fine particles of broken down feldspar and broken down mica that are going to retain moisture, not at the top because we want the vine to struggle a little bit, but all the way at the bottom of the soil type. So about 30 to 60 feet down is like where you're talking about really old vines and really, really deep, deep roots. So if you have all that moisture retained at the top, then the vines aren't going to struggle down deeper. But if you have the vines struggle to get down to like that 30, 60 feet mark, but are able to retain moisture then you kind of solidify not only the strength and resiliency of the vine, but the availability of all of those nutrients that the vine needs because the water is stored there. So really fascinating how granite is so complex. And because of its interesting complexity in terms of its makeup with all those different minerals, it allows it to weather and become like the most perfect soil type, especially for rainier regions. So first region that we are in now, and then we're going to talk about this wine. I'm sorry, I've captured everybody's brain cells probably way too much. But we're going to taste this Muscadet now. This is our first white wine. Sure, you're already drinking it, probably like 3 glasses and wondering when the science lesson is going to stop. And that's pretty much like the bulk of the science. But so this area is the Loire Valley of France. So we're closest to the Atlantic Ocean, and it's actually quite rainy here. So again, we don't want to overwater our vines because they're not going to struggle. They're not going to develop any character, basically. And so you need granite in the soil type to allow that drainage to go through, but still make sure that during those like peak times of August to September, without that rain, that you still have that availability of water and nutrients to the vine. So that's this region. We're on the Loire Valley, close to the Atlantic coast. This region is called Muscadet. Muscadet Sèvres et Maine is the whole French title for it. The grape itself is actually called Melon de Bourgogne because it's fruit that originated actually in Burgundy, France, was brought down to the Loire Valley, never really thrived anywhere in Burgundy, not only grows here, besides some nerdy people that are producing it throughout the rest of the world. So Melon de Bourgogne is the grape. Muscadet is the region, and if everyone sees on their label, I wish I could show you on camera, but it is, my label's gone. It says Sur Lie, and I'll just type that in here so you know what you're looking for. Sur Lie aging, and basically what this is the yeast that is used in the fermentation process to turn the sugars from the grape into alcohol that gets us a good time. The yeast dies off and becomes, like kombucha. It's like this gloppy, gucky mess. Well, that gets filtered off eventually, But some producers, especially for wines like this with really crazy high acidity, want to leave the wine on the lees, or the lees is the dead yeast, basically, for an extended period of time to give it a creamier, richer, rounder texture, kind of soften up the bracing acidity of the rest of these wines. So very, very common in all red wines. Some white wines are going to do it, but not all of them. But it's very common here in Muscadet because the grape itself, Melon de Bourgogne, without that is almost unpalatable. It's so acidic. So the typical timeline for Muscadet sur lie aging is about 6 months. That's the minimum requirement. Some people go up to 9 months or so. This baby was aged on the lees for 3 years. Also, these vines are about 80 years old from one of the top producers in this entire region. They've been around since the 1800s. And so loads of history going into not only the producer, but the vines themselves and this wine specifically. So it's a 2013 vintage. So it spent 3 years on the lees and then the rest in the bottle. And I think it's pretty fascinating to see how a wine that's 7 years old doesn't taste like it's 7 years old. It's still vibrant, it's still youthful, still maintains all of that crazy acidity. And a lot of that has to do with how the vines genetically interact in the soil types that they are grown in. So tell me your thoughts on this wine. Type them in the chat room. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on the aromatics of it, like what are you smelling, the taste profile of it, and what you might be pairing it with, whether right now or just in your own head for next time you drink it. Oh my word, there's so much acid. My mouth is just puckering right up, salivating like crazy. And what's interesting about this is typically Granite has a very low pH, low acidity level in the actual soil. So granitic soils are typically high pH or low acidity levels in the soils. Lower levels of acid in the soils are actually going to produce a little bit higher levels of acidity in the wine. So it kind of has this inverse effect there. And yeah, that's a lot going on in my mouth right there. And all right, cool. Let's see what y'all got here. I know, Tawana, I did not do well in geology in high school either. I did terribly in geology. Also, my teacher had this like very monotone voice, and it was in the afternoon right after lunch. So I honestly wish I had paid more attention to you because now I need all of this information. So, all right. So going to school in Western Branch, I know, and Kitty, you've been teaching all day. It's the last thing you wanted, but now you got it. So you're stuck with me until 8:30. All right, so yellow apple on the nose, Tawana says, awesome, with hints of lemon, fabulous on the palate, holy acid bomb. Yes. Absolutely. Chris Nelson and the gang says, aroma super clean with rain, like you're smelling like rain coming down, like the minerality of like rain evaporating from sidewalks. Do you want to clarify that for me, Chris? Kiwi and honey, I love that. So, that's super interesting. All these tropical fruits, a little bit of that honey note. We've got citrus in here too. We also have these tree fruits like apple and pear, along with some melon. So much going on. Love it with fish or clams. Yeah, absolutely. Clams with like white wine sauce. Your wines always need to be a little bit higher acidic level than your foods that you're eating. So say you're doing clams with like a lemon butter sauce, and that sauce is pretty acidic too. You need your wine to actually be more acidic than the food that you're drinking it with, to make sure that the flavor of the wine just doesn't disappear with the pairing. So love that. Okay, cool. The scent after it rains. Great. Thank you for clarifying. Definitely the scent after the rain. And we'll get into more about like how I use the term minerality. And that's definitely one thing that I talk about a lot. The smell of sidewalk after it's raining in the summertime, it starts evaporating off the sidewalk right away. The smell of the rocks in the air, basically. So love it. We're enjoying it with a little sushi too. Great recommendation. Awesome. You asked for recommendations for food pairing and I went really specific. So I'm glad it worked. Go well with pork, yeah. So especially the sauce that the pork could go with. So think like a vinegar-based pork barbecue rather than like, what's the other, like the tomato-based barbecue sauces. So something a little bit more acidic would be amazing. All right, so the minerality and citrus were prominent. I got a lot of floral notes and some rosemary. So what I love about Muscadet, people like to talk crap about Muscadet all the time because it's can be a very boring wine. It can be just very one-dimensional, but it also can be made incredibly like this. So generally speaking, you have a little bit of everything in Muscadet. You have melon notes, citrus notes, floral notes, you know, a little bit of kind of everything and not a whole lot of anything specific. This wine obviously made on a different caliber, and so we're talking a whole lot of things with this wine, but nothing's screaming at us, right? Besides the acid, maybe the acid screaming a little bit. Everything is kind of like well integrated together. So drink with Coq Saint-Jacques. Okay, I love it. Rick, next time I come over to your house in Williamsburg, I'll bring the wine if you make that. So everything goes well with pork. Yes. All right. So overall, did we all taste the granite in this wine? Okay, I can't keep a straight face when I throw that out there, but hopefully no one wrote down in their tasting notes the taste of granite. But yes, minerality. So as we progress into the different wines that we'll be tasting, we'll talk more about how to use that term minerality in your wine notes. And I guess the big key is if you use it, make sure you understand that you're not talking about tasting the actual geological minerals of the soils themselves. And as long as you understand that, use the term minerality, totally fine. And just preach the gospel to all of your other friends and family members who love wine that we aren't tasting the actual rocks. We are tasting something else. And okay, I could taste the Feldspar. Okay, that's my dad. He is, he's got quite the palate. Yes, specifically Feldspar. It was like 40% Feldspar with a little bit of the mica I was picking up on, but I'll take Feldspar. All right, melon and unripe pineapple. Yes, so again, more that those tropical notes on that too. So I love that pineapple, that underripe, and the kiwi notes. Really interesting. So wet rock, river rock. Okay, I'm gonna take a break here and just talk about this one video. Okay, so I won't share who it actually was, but I was listening to this while I was driving, and the whole video was this person actually taking these rocks and like licking them to really see if they reminded her of the wine that was coming from a region that had that kind of soil. And so she took a wet river rock and she was like, oh, it just smells like dead fish. And she was like, I boiled it for like 10 minutes just to make sure that I wasn't gonna get sick, but it just still smells like dead fish. And she looked at it, she was like, definitely tastes like dead fish. So this idea of licking rocks, I mean, if anyone wants to go lick their granite countertop and see what granite tastes like, you can absolutely try to do that. But what we're actually doing if we just lick a rock is we're just picking up on tiny particles. Don't have flavor profiles. It's the bacteria that exist in and around the rocks that have that. So I say that not because I haven't licked a bunch of rocks before, just out of curiosity, but I say that to make sure that you don't feel like that is your homework unless you absolutely need to do that in your life. So Charlie licks rocks, yes. All right, is the minerality different than one from taste from limestone soil? Yeah, so here's the one thing about, and as we do that, as I'll talk a little bit more about minerality, if you wanna go ahead and go to your second wine, that is the white wine, the Afros, Loire. It's Portuguese, I don't speak Portuguese, and you have to pronounce all of those vowels, and there's so many of them. But that's the next wine that we will be tasting. So go ahead and pour yourself a glass of this. We'll get into the tasting notes, but go ahead and pour it, smell it, taste it, and we'll get going. But let's talk about limestone specifically and tasting minerality in limestone. So limestone is the primary mineral is calcium, right? Limestone is just calcium carbonate. Calcium actually is one of the few mineral nutrients that have a specific flavor profile that is detectable by the human palate. So we all can taste chalk, right? If you've gone out when you were a kid and you clapped the erasers during recess because you were either in trouble or a dork like me and volunteered to do that on a regular basis, that taste of chalk in your mouth is not just the texture of the dust of chalk, it is a specific taste profile. So calcium does actually have a discernible taste. So back a few years ago, I started really exploring the idea of geology, of soil types, of terroir as it relates to how wines taste their minerality. And there's so much conflict about this, even amongst all the professionals, which is why I listened to dozens of videos and they all said very different things. And a big conflict is that, we shouldn't use the word minerality, but I disagree with that because we can. And I think just because the science hasn't really caught up yet to how we understand this texture in our mouth, how we explain this texture in our mouth. Anecdotally, we often talk about minerality. We can smell that sidewalk after it rains. We can smell chalk. We can smell these things. So a couple years ago, I decided for an entire year I was going to focus all of my tasting notes on really trying to see if I could pick up soil types. So that's what I did exclusively for a whole year of homework. It's a lot of tasting wine, but someone's got to do the homework. So what I found is that across the board, I couldn't really ever pick up any specifics in terms of any other soil type except for limestone soils, especially chalky soils, and volcanic ash soils, specifically ash, not just volcanic pumice or bedrock or anything, but specifically volcanic ash. And you've heard me say this before in the soil series classes, that my rationale for this is because those particles of chalk and ash are so fine that they get stirred up by the air and get captured by the actual grape themselves and thus brought into the winery and thus imparts maybe some sort of flavor in the actual wine. Again, there's no science to say that that's a thing. Literally nobody has ever said that except for me. But no one has ever said that it is impossible. So that's what I'm going for. So I think that's why those two specific soil types can be a little bit more distinguished and discernible on the palate versus anything else. No one tastes a wine and be like, definitely granitic soils. But many professionals will smell a wine, taste a wine, and be like, definitely limestone soils, definitely volcanic soils. So that's my posit. That's my hypothesis. I have no idea. There's science, we just still don't know so much about how it all happens and what's going on. And so the romantics out there are like, we don't need to know. We just know that we taste minerality and we're fine with just that anecdotal evidence. We don't need to know why we should not be able to taste the minerality. There have been a few studies that have basically followed all of these wine professionals and cataloged all of the wines that these wine professionals were calling or used or profiled them, like what's the common denominator. And across the board, the common denominator was higher levels of acidity in these wines, lower levels of like fruit. So they weren't these huge, massive, jammy fruit bombs, lower levels of oak. Because all of those things are going to, oak and big overblown fruit and stuff like that, is going to mask some of the subtleties of the texture that we're experiencing with minerality, that like tingling on our tongue, that sensation, that very tactile dancing sensation on our tongue that we call minerality, that sensation. But if you have a lot of overblown, over-extracted fruit and a ton of alcohol and a lot of oak, you're not going to experience that because your palate's just wrecked. Your palate's just totally overblown. But higher levels of acidity are going to accentuate those sensations on your tongue. So whether or not that sensation is there in all wine and we just experience it more with these wines that we call mineral driven, and is it really mineral driven or not, it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter if when I call this wine, oh my gosh, I love the minerality, if I'm really trying to figure out if it's actual minerals on my tongue that's creating this or not. But what we can all agree on is that minerality is the sensation that a wine gives us, and that it lingers on the tongue. So to answer your question, Rick, I'm sorry, that was a very long answer. Is the minerality different than one would expect from limestone soil? I find that wines that have just that mineral sensation, if I'm not getting specific types of like that feeling of chalk or that feeling of volcanic ash, kind of all minerality is very similar for me, regardless of whether it's granitic soils or sedimentary soils or anything like that. I hope that makes some sense, but it probably just confused us all a little bit more. But it was a great question. So this wine is great, awesome. I hope everyone's on the second wine. Ooh, this nose, so much is going on. So wine notes on this, and feel free, just go ahead and pop in your wine notes whenever you like. Wine number 2, orange blossoms on the nose. Yes, so aromatic. This wine to me is just like straight up tangerines, like orange blossom, tangerine, everything about those like winter clementines kind of thing. I love it. So this wine feels less acidic than wine number 1. Need to taste it again, but I would probably agree with that, just knowing this. So slightly less acidic, slightly more tart. Interesting. So talk to me more, Lonnie, about that. So tart and acidic is generally like considered like very similar things. So do you mean like the fruit itself is a little rounder, or I mean the fruit itself is more tart fruit, but the overall sensation of your mouth watering, your mouth puckering is more? Help me figure out what you mean by less acidic but more tart. Wine number 2, on the palate, high acid. You have some salinity and touch of sweetness to the back end, medium plus body. Look at you tasting notes. I love it. I'm so impressed. And yes, so salinity is one of those other things that when they were doing these studies and they were basically cataloging all these wines that these professionals were calling mineral-driven wines, notice that maybe the sensation of salinity in the wine gives us this perception of what minerality is. So again, everyone's got lots of theories and nothing's really been proven or disproven outside of the thought that our roots are actually picking up the geological minerals. So Chris says, number 2 smells musky, overripe cantaloupe and honeydew. Yeah, so it's got all these melon notes like the first wine did, but it's funkier, mustier melon, right? It's a little bit like you cut it and you've left it out for so long that it's kind of got a little slimy on the outside rather than fresh, underripe melon like the first wine had. So awesome. So Anna says, I would also say slightly less tart, but we did have some pre-wine taste Sancerre. Okay, also pretty highly acidic. So let's see. Yeah, I'm getting definitely loads of acid, but I would say across the board, it is to me slightly lower levels of acidity. I would almost describe this wine as like a chalky finish. If I were just blind tasting this wine and I didn't know I was featuring it in a granitic soils class, that's kind of the intensity of minerality that I'm getting on my tongue. So again, we use that word with so much of a grain of salt, no pun intended. But okay, so let's see. Social wine is the best wine. Totally agree with that one. Okay, so flavor profile number 2, Granny Smith apple. Okay, with the peel. Yeah, that bitterness that the peel gives to the actual apple. The pith of a lime. So yeah, we're going a little more bitter on those things. Definitely, especially compared to your tasting notes of the more tropical fruits on the last one. Interesting. Twana says, upon further thought, I may be confusing salinity with the lime. I don't, I would agree that this wine has salinity. So we're in the northern part of Portugal, an area called Minho, M-I-N-H-O, and yeah, Spain, or Galicia, Spain, that northwest corner of Spain. And all of the white wines in Galicia also have this salinity, this almost like green olive kind of component, sea salt finish. So I fully actually support your idea that it is salinity. So I wouldn't recommend backtracking on that. So, and margaritas. Ooh, yes. So some of my favorite wines are wines that have that lime zest and that salinity, because yes, it just feels like the best margarita, but in wine format. So Steve Hill says, I get pineapple and some sweet berries on the nose. I'm looking at him to make sure he's not just yanking my chain. Like berries, like strawberries, blueberries. Okay, all right. My dad always has the most interesting nose. I'm gonna have to anyone want to give him like a thumbs up? Yes, we got some berries too. I'm not sure if I get that, but also all of our palates are so different, right? We're going to pick up on different things because it's going to recall different memories in your brain. The sense of smell triggers memories, and sometimes those memories are blueberries without necessarily having like the notes of blueberries in the wine. So, okay. You did it, Papa. You made me lose my cool a little bit. I was backtracking to try and help you out. All right, so Lonnie says, I felt tart in my cheeks and acid on my tongue. Okay, so Lonnie, I think the acid on your tongue that we're talking about, that's what I'm trying to describe as minerality. Whether or not, you know, that's a technical allowed term or not, that texture on your tongue is what I call, or what I term, minerality. So, but it could also like scientifically be different types of acids. So totally interesting, and I don't know what answer to tell you. So chalky and drier. Yes, I would, let's see.
I think that's a question. She said, is chalky drier?
Anna, is that a question? Is chalky drier? Does chalky mean drier? Or is that you were saying that wine is drier and chalky? Agree with the salinity. All right, cool. I could say maybe some super tart blueberries, but not the sweet ones. Okay, just helping you out there. I like it. I think I'm getting guava on this too. This like guava. If you've ever done guava, and you know, you can't get ripe guava around here, but you like slice it open, you spritz some lime juice on it, and then sprinkle some sea salt and just like scoop it out with a spoon. I love that. It's not as good as like obviously ripe, fresh, tropical guava, but that's how I like guava and around here. And I really get a little bit of those notes on this one. So Anna says, I think I was asking to equate a chalky finish to a drier wine. Yes, I would absolutely agree. Especially, you can have sweet wines, like actual with sugar on it, that are going to feel chalkier. But typically speaking, the wines that have that chalkier style, that chalkier taste, that chalkier finish are definitely going to be drier. And if it is fully dry and you have that chalky sensation too, that's what we in the wine world call bone dry, because it just feels like it's it's sucking the moisture out of your mouth. It is bone dry. So I would absolutely agree with that comparison of chalky and dry. Anyone really get the quartz in this one? We got Feldspar in the last wine. Anyone specifically get quartz? All right, so this area of Minho, Portugal, we're in the north. If you're right on the coast of Portugal, it's very, very dry, almost like desert-like condition. And it's like almost every mile you go inland into Portugal, you get an extra inch of rain per year. It is like almost that specifically. So this area of Minho is further up into the mountains, and it's pretty far inland, but you still have a lot of that Atlantic influence. A lot of these really crazy storms are coming through here too. So rainier, cooler than you think of when you think of the coast of Portugal, beach country, and these just like full granite slopes. So when we say the vineyards are granitic, or you have granite vineyards, you're generally just always referring to something that's about 50% of that one soil type. Not so in this area. This area is like 100% granite. There's broken down in different areas, but up here in Minho, it's pretty solid, which means it's going to have, you know, a lot of drainage because it's just cracks and rocks. It's not fully broken up. You don't have that clay layer yet because it's not fully decomposed like older granite will be, or more weathered granite will be. As you go further south into Portugal, you get a lot more decomposed granite. But this area of Minho, have none of that clay in the bottom, so the water is going to run straight through it. So you get pretty intense wines, especially white wines in this area. If anyone's ever tried some Vino Verde before in their life, they call it that because it means green wine, because they're picking the grapes pretty green, because the grapes struggle to ripen in this area because they are cooler and get a lot more rain. So they struggle to ripen a lot more, and they have pretty high levels of acidity in the wines. And lower levels of alcohol content too, because it's natural before they're harvested. So what was the alcohol content on this one?
11.
11%, right? This is amazing. Everything's like 14.5% like minimum these days. It's really frustrating. And so to find a wine that's just 11% that has this much character is awesome, because I always want that extra glass of wine and I don't want to feel it the next day. So it's good to have those wines that are lower alcohol content. So took a break from the sushi and wasabi soy sauce, and the citrus floral brighten really came out. Awesome. So all of that citrus floral bright qualities came out, especially wasabi, at least because it's done oil-based spice. It doesn't ruin your palate for like a long time. So that's really great. I love wasabi for that reason. So versus like peppers or chilies, you know, they're going to have that oil that's going to linger and kind of like kill your palate for a while. So if you're ever pairing spicy foods with wine, I recommend like wasabi spice instead of chili spice. So, all right, so let's get into reds, because it is 7:52, and I think these two reds are really delicious, and they come from a little bit more very specific soil types here. Obviously, granitic in both of these areas, but in the Loire Valley, you have like big rocks broken up. It's about 50% granite. Here in Minho, we have 100% granite, but pretty solid. We're gonna hop over to California now. Skinner Grenache from El Dorado County, California. Go ahead and pour yourself some of that wine and check out that color. It's so light in color, concentration. And here in this area, so the area also has gold in it, obviously, because it's called El Dorado. This is one of the areas that drew all of the gold rushers in the 1800s to California. And while the gold kind of quickly got dried up and people found gold in other places, the people who really actually made it, like, and actually survived there, was a lot of these wine communities that started vineyards in this area and then made wine to sell to all of the people mining for gold in this area. So this family, the Skinner family, has been around since a great-great-great-grandfather, you know, with many greats, went over to California as a gold rusher, quickly just was like, I'm not sure. He made some money. He found enough to basically have some money, and rather than like a gambling addict, like go back in for the rush, he took that money and kind of like cashed out of the gold industry and bought some vineyards and started a winery. And so it's been passed down for generations. They were mostly selling their fruit to other people. And just recently, like in the early 2000s, this family was going over there and they saw this like farmland that had a gravestone on it that said Skinner. And they're like, that's not a really common last name. So they looked up some family trees, and it turns out like they're the long descendants of this family. So they end up like buying the property and like reinvigorating the winery as a result of like the original idea of this like founding father of this winery. So newer winery, but with, you know, 150 years of tradition in it. So the grape is Grenache. Grenache is, generally speaking, a lower acidic grape, lower tannins as well, and lower fruit concentration. It doesn't love oak, which means maybe we'll be able to experience that minerality in the wine, because there's none of those things that are going to overpower it. But it also doesn't have a crazy high level of acidity that might spark it. So let's taste and see, and we'll go. Tawana says, full disclosure, I opened this at 5:30. Yes, like AM or PM is my first question. And had a glass to pair with dinner. Okay, that assumes PM then. Wow, has it changed since it's open? Awesome, very cool. I love how wines continue to have this conversation with us, and they continue to develop and change and grow. It's the best part about wine is that conversation. So give the wine some good swirls. The nose is so beautiful on this wine. so much like candied flower notes, like cherry notes and strawberry notes, and like yeah, those strawberries that have the foil, the green foil on the top, and then like the just juicy jelly stuff on the inside that I've never seen in a store, but everybody's grandmother has some in a little glass bowl somewhere in their house. Someone tell me where to find those candies, because I really just need to figure out where they're actually sold. So nose, bam, yes, I love it. And Tawana says, I've started to do this fun exercise where I pour a large glass and taste it at 30-minute intervals and track the changes. Oh my gosh, that is such a type A thing to do, and I am in love with that idea. I fully support it. So number 3, we just walked into a flower show, right? This is, you just walked into Norfolk Florist, and yeah, they to me seem a little bit more like wildflowers, and not like pungent like lilies or anything like that, but like geraniums maybe, or wild roses. Yeah. What are y'all tasting in this wine? Ooh. That wine's got some acid. Yeah, Grenache is generally like this, like soft, silky, and this wine is soft and silky, but it's not shy on the acid either. So, but it's got lychee fruit. Okay, interesting. That typically I always get that in white wines, but I can see that too, especially the lychee texture, that almost like grape texture. I like it. Such a stark difference from 1 and 2. Yes. For sure. Greenery too. Yeah, there's like these roasted or toasted or smoked herbs kind of thing going on in the wine. All right. So does anyone get that sensation of minerality on their tongue with this wine? Wow, second taste is quite a bit different. Second taste is way silkier. I think like chemically was playing off of the white wine a little bit that was still kind of like lingering in my mouth. So second taste is a lot silkier, a lot smoother, a lot more like velvety without being lush. Like it's not a luscious wine, right? It's not dense, it's not heavy. It's still like light and lifted and really feminine. Beth also said it gets nuttier as she drinks it. Okay, nice, nutty. I like it. Like almond skins, or maybe even like macadamia nuts, a little bit like that richer texture. Not really on the minerality. I'd agree with you on this one. So this area, specific granite soils type, definitely more decomposed. So you are going to have a little bit more of that clay on the bottom layer because this is more weathered, more decomposed granite. It's also still about 50% granite here. You have some other soil types kind of all mixed through. But this area is kind of known for their granitic soils. But again, you only have to be about 50% granite in the soil types to really be called granitic soils. So this is a little bit more of that decomposed, and I think as a result, I am getting more of the mica specifically in this wine. One of these days I'm going to do that, and I want to do it. I'm going to work on keeping my face straight, and I want to do it around some like other wine professionals, you know, because so many wine professionals are just too cool for school, and they just never want to be the person to disagree or didn't have that idea first. And so I'm just going to say that something like, yeah, we're like really picking up the higher mica contents in this one, in the soil. And I just want to see everybody go like, yeah, totally. Like, absolutely. Yeah. Now that you say it, yes. That just goes to show you so much of the wine world is this emperor's new clothes, where some expert gets up in front, tells you what you should be tasting or smelling or thinking about a wine. And then just everyone's like, oh, power of suggestion. Also, I'm afraid to disagree and have my own opinion. So hopefully you all have been coming through these classes for long enough that you are not afraid to disagree with me and not afraid to have your own opinion, even if it's like my dad and getting blueberries on a white wine. So we are struggling here, recovering even. So talk to me about why are you struggling and recovering. Sorry, I'm just getting into the chat room now again. Minerality is dwarfed by the floral and fruit notes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe because the wine also has that lower levels of acidity, now that I'm going back and trying it again, versus the first two white wines, all that acidity like made that minerality or that textural sensation more pronounced. This wine has a little bit less of that. So ornery indeed, yes. Now y'all know where I get it from. Brought some good Swiss Emmentaler and Riesling today. Is that a local Swiss grape? I'm not actually familiar with that at all. So please do tell and send me the producer. It'd be really interesting. If you can't taste the soil type, are you still able to pick up which soil type in the flavor of the grapes of the wine? Can you taste the different levels of strain in the vine? Yes, so here's how. So we know the vine is going to act differently, chemically speaking, genetically speaking, in different soil types based on how much water and nutrients it has. So that's part of soil. It's just water and nutrient availability. But how does that water and nutrient availability change the taste of the grapes? Well, more intense, focused flavors, more concentrated flavors, and I don't mean concentrated colors, I don't mean jammy flavors, I just mean concentrated flavors are definitely like a byproduct of a vine that's been stressed a little bit. Versus if you've ever had that wine that's like, I just taste like two things and then it just dies and then it's nothing. That's kind of indicative of a wine that's considered high vigor vine. So the vine is definitely focused on growth, not on production of the best berries possible. And that is a result of the soil type. So while you might not be able to taste like, oh, I can definitely tell this is granitic soils that are decomposed at this level with this much clay in it because of how concentrated the fruit is, you can definitely say like, because the flavor is a little bit more concentrated, a little bit more complex, a little bit more layered than like your basic two notes die off and then that's it. So yes, soil type does affect the overall flavor of the wine, but a lot of it is just this indirect result of how the grapes develop themselves. So such a boss song. Well, thank you. But I think I've made a whole mess out of trying to explain or unexplain mineralities here. So hopefully it hasn't been that bad. Number 3 on the nose, cedar and cigar box and some rubber like a eraser on a pencil. Interesting. Yeah, I can totally see that, and not Emperor's New Clothes, not just power of suggestion, but absolutely. And I'm actually getting a little bit of pencil shavings too now that we're talking about pencils.
It has a sweetness to it.
And some sweetness to it, some mom says. Some mom's here, everybody. She just walked in a little while ago, so she says hello back. When wine would be easy to drink by itself, yes. So Grenache is what I call my guilty pleasure red wine, meaning it's not going to beg for me to think about it a whole lot. And sometimes I struggle finding a wine that I can just relax with. Grenache is that for me because it's not demanding all of my attention and focus. I can just sip it and really enjoy it. So I love Grenache for that reason. And I call it the guilty pleasure because as sometimes we think we could only be drinking like the really nerdy wines, the really focused wines, the wines that are really intense. That's sometimes just exhausting. So, all right, Allison says, by the way, hello, Allison. Welcome to the chat room. What does it mean to have pencil shaving notes in it? Now, to me, pencil shaving is much more of an aromatic. It's something I smell, not necessarily taste in a wine. But I smell like literally you're going up in the classroom, back before mechanical pencils, and you're sharpening your pencil, and it's kind of that dusty, gritty kind of smell in the nose, that graphite, basically broken down graphite, or if you've ever just drawn with straight up graphite sticks. It has a very distinct smell, and I get that on the nose. I don't necessarily taste that on the palate. That's not a flavor profile. It's not the same thing as like a textural component of these like chalkier mineral components. But to me, pencil shavings is often a note I find in red wines, lighter red wines, and wines, and it's an aromatic specifically. Great question. If ever anyone needs a little bit more clarification on the crazy tasting notes that I threw out there, please, please, please let me know. Let's see. Chris says flavor profile: mealy, red, delicious apple. Ooh, mealy like a bad way, or is it like juicy? Tell me if that's like a good note, Chris, or a bad note. So, it smells like burnt reefer. Okay, interesting. Grenache often does have that quite herbaceous aromatic to it. And yes, definitely one time I opened up a Grenache that was so intense, I opened it up and I was in the restaurant. And I thought someone was like smoking pot in the restaurant or something like that. I was like looking around, I was like, what is going on? Where is that? Who is, oh my word, that's the wine. So I would agree with you. I think that there is always this this smoked herbaceous note to Grenache in different levels of intensity.
Some dark chocolate on the nose.
Chocolate on the nose. Okay. I like the chocolate call. Definitely that dark, bitter chocolate. I almost say like cocoa powder, like baking chocolate. Not chocolate I'd want to eat watching a movie, but that powdery, bitter chocolate. So Tawana says, welcome to the party, some mom. All right. Clarification from Chris here. Mealy is an older apple, like we should have thrown it out yesterday. Not necessarily bad, but like that just past fresh or ripe. Yeah, I like that call. And to me, it's so much. You were talking about it getting nuttier too. Someone was talking about it getting nuttier as it's open more. And I think I'm almost getting like the Halloween when you like what do they call it? The caramel coated apple, and then you like roll it in the walnuts and stuff like that. So it's that nutty component of it, almost this sweet component of it too. Got the apple in there too. And then as a final garnish, you sprinkle some burnt reefer on top, and that's I think the perfect description of this wine. So. Chris says this wine's not the fave, but loving learning about the aroma and flavor. Okay, so what I'd say is if this wine like wasn't your jam, put a cork back in it, put it in the fridge for like 20 minutes while we finish up the rest of the wine and the last selection. Try it again at a slightly cooler temperature. Sometimes the funkiness of Grenache can come out less if it's chilled slightly, especially a lighter style Grenache like this. So highly recommend throw it back in the fridge for about 20 minutes and go back to it at 8:30 and tell me if your minds have changed at all about this. So can we edit the reefer? Yeah, I'll put that up on my website as the official review. I'm sure Skinner Vineyards would not be paying me for my wine writing skills, but who knows, maybe. They're in California. I think they're cool with it. All right, whenever you're ready, we are going to try this Cabernet Sauvignon from South Africa, from Stellenbosch, South Africa, some of the oldest granite vineyards in the whole world. So I had mine in decanter. I like to, if it's been kind of sitting in a decanter for a while before I pour it, I like to just kind of shake it up a little bit, kind of integrate the top layers that have gotten a lot more oxygen with the bottom layers of the wine that have gotten less. Then pour it into your glasses and go from there. Or if you did the West Virginia decant, then just make one more shake before you pour. So, all right. South African wines have such distinct aromatics to it. And a lot of people say that the distinct aromatics are because of the specific soil type. And, you know, again, we don't necessarily have scientific evidence to support that, but there's so much anecdotal evidence that when you just smell South African wine, I'm talking like red, white, high-end, cheaper every day, like everything in between from all these different regions, there's a lot of similarities in just like a specific smell. And for me, it's always like this this smoky note, like a smoldering smoke. Like if you ever did a campfire and you put it out, like poured some water on it, and it's kind of like that wet wood, that wet dank wood is just kind of like smoking, smoldering, not full on fire, but just kind of this buildup. So we always get this like smoky note in South African wines, and some pretty green notes too, like that wet dank wood, and like you throw a bunch of like grass, not reefer, but like actual like wild grass in the fire too, but everything's a little bit wet and smoking. So to me, that's a similar flavor profile or aromatic profile specifically for a lot of South African wines. And, you know, I have a feeling in 50 years from now, hopefully I'll still be doing some wine stuff. 50 years from now, we'll have a lot more information about the science behind the aromatic compounds of wine, because these are actual molecules, right? Like when we smell a specific oak, that's actually a molecule that is connecting with our nose. When we smell strawberries, it's not a strawberry it's not a molecule from a strawberry plant. That is a very specific, unique aromatic compound that is individual. Same thing with acids, tannins. They're all specific molecules. Like you can actually say, scientifically pinpoint how much acidity a wine has. So there is some level of subjectivity to wine, as always. There's a lot of objective truth about wine tasting notes. It's just really interesting to see and to think about how it will change in 50 years as science catches up with our palates. We know it to be true that we can often smell and taste minerality. Why is that, and what is it we are experiencing? Science will need to tell us soon. So, all right, get your noses in there. Let's smell this wine. So, because South Africa has some of the oldest granite vineyards, so it's decomposed the most, it's weathered down the most, it actually has the most pink notes in the wine too. So the pink, remember, is coming from the sodium, specifically in the Feldspar. So as the Feldspar breaks apart, it leaves the sodium particles, and the rest of the actual Feldspar goes down and forms that clay layer with the mica. But those sodium deposits are kind of all throughout, so the soils just look straight up pink. It is really wild to see all these pink vineyards, specifically throughout Stellenbosch. A little campfire, okay. A little Band-Aid, okay, and leather. Love that. So the Band-Aid call is more related to like Brettanomyces, that fungus that grows in the cellars, in the rafters of cellars. It gives it sometimes a barnyardy flavor, sometimes Band-Aid, sometimes dirty diaper, sometimes just horseshit. All of that is Brettanomyces, and I think that there is a little bit of Brettanomyces in here too. So love those calls. Again, if you're thinking of something and are afraid to put it in the chat room because it sounds too weird, please put it in there. I'm probably begging for like someone to finally say blank. And as I say that, my dad starts typing, so now I'm all of a sudden nervous. What's he gonna say? Tawana, on the nose, I'm getting some brown baking spices. Cool, maybe nutmeg. Yeah, so that's coming from the oak. Fabulous. Raisinated fruit, getting some funk with the extinguished campfire. Cool. If you're afraid of speaking out, think of me. Yes, that's perfect. Live like my dad and just say the weird tasting notes that are on your mind. Yeah, I like that call. So I'm guessing we're definitely not going to be able to get a mineral sensation on the wine with this. We have elevated alcohol contents. We have lower levels of acidity than especially the white wines. And with that oak, we're probably going to get oak textural components like that on the tongue. So, Steve, not old, but a good vintage. I like that. I'm going to get that shirt printed. Number 4, on the aroma, herbaceous, rosemary, black cherry. Yeah. Different herbs, though, than the Grenache, right? The Grenache had reefer. It had like a little bit of like these, I think we said called rosemary earlier. A little bit more like aromatic, perfumed aromatic herbs versus this is a little bit more, to me, like thyme, like more bitter, savory herbs than the really aromatic, pungent herbs. So Anna says, a house cleaner similar to Clorox cleanup wipes, but like I just cleaned a black pepper currant mess up. So specific. I like. So are you getting like bleach notes in there? That's interesting. Definitely the black pepper currant mess up. I love that black pepper call too. All right, I need to focus on that. I need to try this one again and think about like Clorox specifically. Tell me if you're using a fresh glass or if you're using the same glass that the Grenache was in. Using a fresh glass, maybe try pouring it into the other glass like the Grenache was in, just to see maybe like we had some dish detergent left in the glass or something. Sometimes I get so much black pepper in that. Sometimes I get like a cleaner vibe, not like a more clean vibe, but a house cleaner vibe in wines that have that really intense floral note. Like it's almost like this fake chemical floral note. But specifically Clorox. All right, I'm gonna work on this. Almost to me, I'm getting the way the alcohol evaporates into my sinuses because it is higher alcohol content. So I'm getting like this pop of this alcohol sensation burning kind of into my sinuses. So maybe that is also giving you that sensation too. So same glass from the entire night. Okay, cool. So it's not that. I always recommend that. I like to keep all 4 of mine because otherwise I'll accidentally pour wine into the wrong glass or refill it with the wrong one. So, all right. Baby from the decanter though, cleaned with green apple dawn last. Oh, okay. Here's the thing. Never clean a decanter with soap. Hot water. And if you're trying to like at the end of the night, say, you know, the wine's gone and you have some of that like wine residue and it's not really coming out with just hot water swirling around, put some uncooked rice in the bottom with a little bit of baking soda with really hot water, swirl that around. The friction of the rice as it pushes the baking soda around will clear out any stains inside your decanter. And then you just pour it down the garbage disposal, down the trash can or something like that. And you don't have to ever worry about getting soap in a decanter because it's so hard to like fully rinse out your decanters. So that's how I recommend everybody. You can buy these really expensive decanter beads cleaning and all this stuff, and such a pain. But everyone's got uncooked rice and baking soda hopefully in your house, and so that's how I recommend to everyone you clean your crystal decanters or non-crystal decanters. So Rick says bitterness on the aftertaste. I need to get into this. Oh yeah, those tannins are like fingernails down my tongue and the insides of my cheek. Really rustic, rough tannins. And this wine has been decanted, you know, for about 2 hours now. And all of those bitter herbs and those baking spices that someone else was talking about, I think it was Tawana up there, those are on the bitter side, right? You've got the black pepper and then you've got that bitter cinnamon, that bitter nutmeg, not sweet spices, but all of the bitterness. Yeah, those tannins are alive and well in this wine. This wine way over delivers power for the punch for like this price point. So at 20% off, what I think it's $28, 20% off, that is $22 or something like that. Killer deal. I was so impressed by this wine. South Africa is really honestly producing, to me, some of the best value wines on the market today. South Africa and Chile specifically, but love South African cabs. So needs a fatty steak for sure. Yes, yes. I love it. So Anna says, I once put juiced grapefruit in a decanter and ruined it. Oh man, the acids might, it's so easy to ruin a decanter. So that's why I never recommend people spend all these like hundreds of dollars on these like super fancy decanters. Just get a simple one that you can wash easily and not worry about it. So Tawana says, can you use ice with salt like you do coffee pots? Yeah, absolutely. It's really just about creating friction to break off any of the stains. So ice, salt works, rice and baking soda works. No matter, all of those are great. So Some mom says pink peppercorn. Yes. So we got black pepper, but we also have this pink peppercorn note. Probably because that sodium deposits from the broken down feldspar. Just kidding. But woodsy, licorice, dark oaky. Like, yes. Awesome. So, yeah. There's so much going on in this wine. I'm going to pour the rest of this in the bottle. I'm going to put a cork in it, and I'm going to try it again tomorrow night to see how it opens up and continues to change, because I think this wine is just so good. This is a recent find for me when I did my Cabernet Castile, and I'm just really, really happy with it. So, okay, let me recap real quick the things that we have learned. We have learned the definition of terroir, that it means the whole sense of place, not just soil, but also means climate and aspect, like where you are in relation, rainfall, all of this stuff. So soil, climate, aspect, all goes into terroir, or the sense of place. Within soil, you have soil types, like what it's actually made of, and then the texture, how broken down it is. The aspect of the concept of minerality is confusing, because we sense it but can't explain why. We know it is not because the roots themselves are absorbing geological minerals and then somehow transposing those minerals into the flavor profile of the wine. We know that's not the case, but we can't explain what is the case. Anecdotally, we just know it is. We know minerality is a sensation, a tactile sensation, a texture on our tongue, that it might be similar for all wines, regardless of the types of minerals that the soil was in. We know that limestone, though, that chalky texture, and volcanic ash generally are known to have more specific and pronounced differences in the flavor profile of the wine. We know we cannot taste granite in the soil, or feldspar, or mica, or quartz. But all of those things help create differences, unique differences in the terroir, in the soil, in the terroir of these vineyards, and make different, unique wines. And if you're truly making what we call terroir-driven wine, that means the vines themselves, you're allowing them to express their sense of place, versus manufactured, or what I call formulaic wines, where they're just literally fruit and then manipulating everything into the winery to create a specific flavor profile that's consistent every time. Terroir-driven wines generally always taste different every vintage, because they're expressing that vintage, that unique year was different than, we all know 2020 was a different year than 2019. So terroir-driven wines will express differences in vintage too. So soil has a lot to do with that. The most important thing that soil does to create different expressions in the wine is the availability of water and nutrients to the vine itself. So how is it feeding or stressing the vine is the most important part of soil, and how it creates different flavor profiles in our wine. I hope this took some of the confusion away about minerality in wine, about soil types and why does it matter. But please understand that as you continue watching other wine movies, reading wine books, listening to other wine writers and stuff, people are going to disagree with me, right? People are going to say like, oh no, the winemakers are going to say like, oh yes, you definitely like because the roots dig down so deep, we definitely get the sense of that bedrock down below in the taste of this wine. Like, professionals are going to tell you that you can taste geological minerals in your wine. So just as always, be kind as we have these conversations with other people, and understand everyone's on a different part of their wine journey. And we don't know it all yet, right? Like, no matter how much we all study and how much we all try and figure this out, there's no possible way that we can know it all. It's just fun to try to learn a little bit more each day. So great question. Any last questions? We'll go ahead and sign off. Remember, November 11th, Veterans Day, is our next class, and it's Oregon versus Burgundy. So 2 different Oregon Pinot Noirs versus 2 different Pinot Noirs from Burgundy. We will be talking about some terroir aspects, some soil type aspects of the wine, but it will really be more analytical of the tasting notes of this wine, less of the science, geology, chemistry lecture that you got in this class. So every class is a little bit different, but next class is going to be a lot more tasting notes and analytical notes on the wine. So
Everyone's favorite.
question, the number 4 correct is not filtered. And yeah, filtering the wine will like remove some of the aromatic compounds in the wine. So it'll make it more clear, more aesthetically pleasing, and less of that sediment and gunk in the bottom of your glass. But it does sometimes remove some of the aromatic profiles. So some always reminds me, I always forget to ask, what was everyone's favorite wine of the night? So if you could have one more bottle of any of these 4 white or red wines, which would it be? So please do tell. So Ryan, yes, thanks for tuning in, Ryan. Hopefully I get this shipping license soon so you can participate in the wines. Stoked about the Pinot class. Yes, bring it on Burgundy. I love it. And you're saying, oh yeah, you're saying bring it on Burgundy because you're an Oregon girl. I was like, what do you mean bring on the Burgundy? Gotcha, bring it on Burgundy. Them's fighting words. Tawana, Rick Morrison says number 1 was the favorite. Oh yeah, that Muscadet was just so delightful. Tawana says number 2 Portuguese white, number 3 for the red. So the Grenache overall favorite was the 3rd wine. So especially when you had it with dinner too, it just creates a little bit more of an emotional experience, emotional connection. Salmon picks the Skinner Grenache.
That's what I want more of right now.
Yes, that Skinner Grenache, so delicious. That's what she wants more of right now. Yeah. Julie says number 1 and 3. Okay, great. So 1 and 4 were the favorites. Okay. Across the board, we've got a lot of variability. Sometimes I do these classes and like 99% of people thought one wine was the real winner of everything. So Allison loved number 2, great, the Portuguese white, and Will loved number 3, the California red. Awesome, love it. Oregon is gonna stand up next to the old world. Yeah, I think the wines are gonna show really well regardless. So very, very cool. So what I might number 4, very nice decanted. Yes, especially in a very clean decanter. Awesome. Well, if y'all are interested in ordering more of any of these wines, the only wine that is like really limited in production would be that Muscadet, because I think that's the last of the vintage. I've got a few more cases available, and that's about it. Everything else I'll have available for a bit longer. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the class. I look forward to seeing you again in real life very soon. Until then, email me all your thoughts about wines for the holidays. I'll help you pick out all your gifts for employees and family members and friends and neighbors you don't like. We'll give them the wine you don't like or something like that. And looking forward to the holiday season with you all and sharing lots of wine, even if it's virtually together. So till I see you again, cheers.